Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host, Dusty O'Connell, and I'm here with the the most popular man in the Vikings blogosphere. It seems like some days he's the editor-in-chief of Vikings Territory and a contributor to Daily Norseman, among a variety of other blogs. Bleacher Report is in there as well. And he just got back from an internet media tour on the first day of free agency. And he's Arif Hassan. How you doing, Arif?
Good. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm a little concerned that we are going to have issues with you having just done two separate Vikings roundups for two other media organizations. And I'm a little concerned that you may skip over some crucial piece of information, believing that you had already said it, when in reality you had only mentioned it someplace else.
I think we'll get over. We'll get everything.
I like the way you put it on Twitter earlier this week. We have a penchant for what was it?
It was a
unrepentant long-windedness.
Yeah,
I believe was the phrase you coined, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And it's true, we do have a penchant for long-windedness.
That is who we are at our core.
And really, we should all just be who we are. Before we get into the free agency part of the show, I envision this show as primarily a free agency kind of breakdown, because there was a whirlwind of activity, as today was, like I mentioned, the inaugural day of NFL free agency. Deals were made, deals were reneged on, deals were not made. Some people passed physicals and yet were deemed, or some people failed physicals but were deemed to have passed anyway. And some curious moves that had nothing to do with free agents necessarily, but occurred during free agency. Before all that, though, I just wanted to stop and take a moment and thank everyone who has contributed to making Norse Code the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. Our website, norsecodepodcast.com, and our accompanying RSS feed, hosted by the fine folks at Libsyn, would not be possible without the donations of the fine folks that listen to the show every week or 2 weeks or however often we end up releasing an episode. And I wanted to mention from last week, we talked about one of our listeners had been a contributor who had a question to the mailbag, and I had a sneaking suspicion that we might not have been complete in our accolades. And my suspicion turned out to be correct. Mike Canfield also had a question answered in last week's mailbag, and he is also a supporter of Norse Code. So thank you, Mike, for your support, and you will be escalated to the top or near the top of all mailbag queues in the future.
You're such a cad, Dusty. Why don't you pay attention to these things for us?
Well, I did a much better job this week. There will be no such mistakes. And luckily, our listeners gave me ample opportunity to execute on this part of my obligation for this week. Ayush Maskey sends us $10 with the note, "Getting my Vikings fix from Hawaii."
Thank you, Ayush.
From the Big Island, Honolulu, Hawaii. A wonderful place. I wish I was there right now, and not in Denver. It's been the snowiest February on record.
It's actually beautiful in Minneapolis right now.
Yeah, it's nice in Denver right now, but the last few weeks have been, well, reminiscent of the weather I left
Right.
the upper Midwest to get away from. Also sending us money, this guy from Coon Rapids, Minnesota, Bradley Peterson, $10 with the short message, "Doing my part."
Yeah, I knew a guy from Coon Rapids once.
I like the doing my part bit. Just a simple, straightforward, to the point. This is just what we do. We pony up so that we can support the.
This is what we do.
It's just what we do. You see an obligation and you don't complain about it. You just execute on it. You need a good Minnesota Vikings podcast. You open your wallet for it. That's just the kind of stoic Minnesota get things done attitude that Prairie Home Companion has lampooned for many years. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And if anyone else would care to join the Norse Code Wall of Fame, or even just to view it, see what kind of amazing company you can keep by contributing your $5 to the show just one time. That's all we ask, just to put your name on that big board. Go to NorseCodePodcast.com. The little hamburger menu in the top left corner contains a link to the Wall of Fame, and there's a little PayPal donate button at the bottom of every page. So you can just do what you think is right, which actually I'll even give you a little help on that one. Just give us the $5, become a member of the team, and then sit back and enjoy all the amazing content you get from Norse Code, such as this update about the Adrian Peterson foofara, such as it is. We contemplated doing an episode last week, but I chose to defer. I was like, well, this is just, more Sturm und Drang. It doesn't really have a whole lot of, useful value. And we can probably just, report the new news next week. Because there's always new news with
There's
this
always
guy.
new news.
And it's still it's like news-ish. The stuff that came out, that was just today, right? About Peterson meeting with the Wilfs and Rick Spielman in New York.
Yeah, that was all somehow today.
So much happened today. It seems like we needed more days for all of it. But I guess the highlight or low light of this interaction was Peterson, or someone in his camp, wondering very publicly why the Wilfs did not send a private jet. The initial reports indicating that Peterson had gone to New York made mention that he flew on a commercial flight, and there was later at least a moderate display of butthurt from the Peterson camp about why the Wilfs didn't think that Adrian was worth sending a private jet.
So the reason I'm interested in this is because I got a couple of direct messages from, I wouldn't say people in the know, but people who know people who know people in the know, like the kind of thing where you would raise your eyebrow, but you wouldn't use as a source in a story or anything like that.
So sources close to sources close to sources close to a negotiation.
Yeah. So definitely people who you raise an eyebrow because they would know maybe more than a call-in radio guy. But nothing that you would be like, well, yes, this is true. But yeah, it's just so someone said that there was no visit at all. It was a conference call. I was like, that's probably not true. I don't think Tom Pelissero screwed up that, right? And then I was also told, well, actually, I don't. You don't have to worry about whether or not there's a commercial jet or a private jet, because Adrian Peterson actually initiated this, and so he wanted to meet the Wilfs in New York, and so he organized them. So you don't have to worry about that. And then I also heard that the talks were already going to happen, regardless of what happened in that meeting between Zimmer, Spielman, and Peterson. And that the talks were basically just on schedule. It's just a thing that you do. It just so happens that we learned about the talks hours before free agency started. And that they happened on the day of that. Okay, so that's weird and awkward timing. But okay. I think that third thing is true. That the talks were sort of par for the course. They were going to happen no matter what direction the meeting with Zimmer and Spielman went, unless it was to an extraordinary extreme in either direction. So if the meeting went really well, then you wouldn't have had to have this meeting with the Wilfs, because then you would have just announced, yeah, so Adrian Peterson has agreed to restructure his contract, and we've fully guaranteed his first 2 years, whatever, right? They would have been able to announce something. Or if it went really poorly and Adrian just decided at the end of it, screw you guys, I'm going home.
But even if Peterson felt like, screw you guys, I'm going home. He can't say that yet
Right, but
because he still doesn't have a place to go.
if the meeting goes that poorly, then you don't need that second meeting, right? That's all I'm saying. He doesn't say anything publicly, right? But then you don't hold the second meeting because there's no point to it. But yeah, that's all I'm saying. Is like, if the meeting is in either extreme, then that second meeting doesn't happen. But I think that's kind of it. I think that's the only. And so I don't think you need to read into the fact that this meeting occurred. You can read into the fact that Adrian Peterson's camp, maybe not Adrian Peterson himself, but the camp wanted it to make it known that they were upset with how it was set up. Which, like, if we're talking about like perceived disrespect, it is a. I mean, first, that's absurd as a thing to leak to media, but whatever. But if you're talking about like perceived disrespect, I mean, you could get into anything. Like, you could talk about the fact that Zimmer was wearing a blazer and Spielman was wearing a suit in their meeting, but Peterson was only in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Like, if you wanted to, you could read into anything for perceived respect and disrespect, which isn't to say that like signals aren't important in like determining one's standing with other people. I mean, that's just like a cultural thing. That's like a thing people do. But this feels manufactured. You know what I mean?
So are you saying we are not going to take the bait and participate in this wildly speculative, potentially fake outrage?
Well, I mean, no, but I think I have the answer anyway, right? Like, I put out a story saying the Vikings are attempting to get rid of Peterson no matter what. So I already think I have an answer. So I don't need to read into anything because I think I know.
Well,
Um,
so given that story is true, then doesn't this kind of seem like just like negotiation tactics that are sort of playing themselves out in kind of a silly and awkward but still calculated way?
yeah, I think so. I mean, like, I was mentioning this earlier somewhere else, but like, I obviously have an incentive to believe this, but I think it's a pretty reasonable take that any move that makes it seem like the Vikings want Adrian Peterson is also a move that theoretically increases his trade value, right? Um, and what's interesting is that if you approach it from that perspective, which let's say is a cynical perspective, right? Because it's a genuinely always skeptical approach to the public face of the Vikings. So let's say that's the cynical perspective. Then you could even read into the fact that there was no movement on the Adrian Peterson front. Today is free agency opened because the later you act on Peterson, the more you act like you want him back, right? And the more you act like you want him back, the more you have increased the number of buyers in the scenario by one, right? The Vikings. And so, and the flip side of that, of course, is that you decrease the number of buyers because they act while they're scared and don't know if they can get a running back. Say, for example, the Colts got Frank Gore, right? They're probably no longer in the market for Adrian Peterson. And so that's like the balancing act you would take if you were a cynic and you thought that the Vikings were going to move on no matter what, and then they waited to move Adrian Peterson. Also, the other cynical view is that they just haven't hammered out a deal, which seems unlikely for a person as prepared as Rick Spielman. Remember, Percy Harvin was traded a day after free agency as well, so that's possible. I don't know. Tom Pelissero is a guy I trust a lot, right? He has a lot of sources inside the organization. He's very diligent. I mean, the reason he got plucked from USA Today from 1500 ESPN is because of the quality of his work. And so when he says something like, so I've talked to like a dozen people, so he went on to 1500 ESPN as a guest with Darren Wolfson, and he said, and I've talked to like a dozen people, and every conversation I've had with someone, I have personally come away with a different feeling. This is someone who I would argue has like a fairly honed intuition, like for a reporter's sense of like, when someone's blowing, smoke up his ass, or when someone is providing him information that he can use as a reporter. And he's fairly discriminating in that way. Like, I don't think I recall Pelissero just like whiffing or missing on a story. And so he's, when he says like, I've come away from these conversations with this impression, I think that he's saying that after it comes through like his bullshit filter. And so when he says every conversation I've had, I've come away with a different impression for how the team feels about Adrian Peterson and how the situation will play out. So I had this conversation with one person, and I am convinced that he's going to be traded. I had this conversation with another person, and I am sure that they're going to keep Adrian Peterson. Just yesterday, I talked to someone who convinced me that Adrian Peterson was going to be traded to the Cardinals. And so that there might be some element of that. Now, I mean, I talked to 3 people that were all convinced of the same thing. That's why I put out a story. But I haven't heard back from 2 of them since publishing the story. And the other one hasn't changed their story, so that hasn't changed. But I wouldn't be surprised if the thoughts and feelings of the Vikings have themselves genuinely changed, which would be very confusing to me. But if the Vikings are as conflicted as Adrian Peterson, A, they need to get over it and make a decision. But B, that could explain why it's a tougher situation rate. Because here's the thing about Pelissero. He said that this was the haziest and least clear he's seen covering a team, not just the Vikings, but a team in his career as a writer. And that includes when he was covering Brett Favre's 8 retirements. So, I mean, I guess you can take any statement with a grain of salt. And I understand fans are typically pretty suspicious of anonymous sources from reporters, but I mean, anonymous sources are batting 800. They're pretty good. So I think that skepticism of anonymous sources is too high, and people are like, well, it's all speculation. We don't know anything. You haven't named your sources. You can't put a name on it. People aren't willing to, put the reputation on the line, which that last part, obviously, that's why you can trust them. But in this case, it may be that you can't follow the story because there's no direction for the story to go in. I did hear back from someone outside of the organization. And it's one, so I didn't publish this, and I'm putting it in the podcast so I can provide sort of proper clarification and context. It's one person who is loosely connected with the organization who may or may not be aware of the intimate dealings of the organization themselves, and it's not confirmed, right? So I haven't doubled back or checked with another source because I don't have another source connected to this organization, and so it's not something I can follow up on. But I have heard from someone loosely connected with the organization that organization believes that the Vikings are genuine in wanting to trade Adrian Peterson. So the Vikings are transmitting to other people that they're willing to let go of Adrian Peterson, perhaps, right? Which is what you would need to do. Internally, if they don't feel that way, that's a really upsetting situation from a fan's perspective because they just need to make a decision on them. But it also makes it really difficult for people to just follow because if the organization doesn't have a direction regarding, the highest paid player on the team embroiled in the largest controversy on the team, then that's a real problem that makes me worry about the Vikings in general.
Do you think that this might be related somewhat to, why Matt Egiata got a 1-year contract?
No, I think that he's a marginal-ish enough player that you provide 1-year contracts. I mean, a lot of the restricted free agents from around the league got 1-year contracts, so I don't think it's related to that. The only running back I've heard of that the Vikings have attempted to contact is Stevan Ridley. That's a report from Chris Thomas and Pioneer Press, and the report is couched in language like if the Vikings move on from Adrian Peterson, they've contacted Ridley. So I think that the Vikings will be much more active about running backs, at least publicly active about running backs as soon as something happens with Peterson. But I don't think that any activity they've taken with running backs, aside from the Ridley report, can be evidence of anything. And the Ridley report is super, if you read the story, it says it 8 times. Hey, it's all contingent upon this Peterson thing. So it's super conditional.
So it's emblematic of every other story about the Peterson situation right now. It's all bullcrap, and it contradicts a lot of what other intelligent people believe to be true.
Right, I mean, bullcrap implies intention. I think. Uh, I mean, it's just confusing. It's all confused because it seems like people genuinely in the organization believe this thing that they're telling a reporter, and then I mean, the other possibility is that the entire organization has been inculcated into how a Spielman does what he does. In which case, the confusion is phenomenal work. Dude, like, fantastic job, Vikings.
It's all chaff. This is all just like masterful PR. It'd be fun to believe that, but I don't know that any organization exhibits that level of institutional control. Not even the Patriots.
I mean, no organization does, because you'd have to like control the janitors, right?
Oh.
Like, you'd have to control the equipment people. Like, good luck.
And if there's anything we've learned from the Patriots is that equipment people are notoriously hard to control.
God, I wish I made that joke. That was really good. But yeah,
Well, you set me up with a pretty unmissable opportunity.
that was a softball. Yeah, I don't think the Vikings have implemented Spielman training organizationally. Certainly, they haven't done it for Mike Zimmer, who's very open.
So really, the end of all this, the final point is that nobody really knows anything of any substance. Probably not even the Vikings or Adrian Peterson.
I think that is the smartest takeaway, that the Vikings may not have a direction. Is that the takeaway? I don't know.
Well, given that you
smartest takeaway
kind of broke your news that, or broke the news that the Vikings were trying to get rid of him, maybe that's not a take you want to commit to 100%, but it really just seems like we're still in wait and see mode. Even though more drips and drops of news or news-ish items come out, there doesn't just seem to be that much forward motion on.
It's just so unusual, because when I broke the story, the third source that I talked about, a couple days later, told me that I was that the thing was still true. But when I read the story, I did get like conversations from other people who believed it to be. The only conversations I've had privately about this story have all been confirmation of the story. That's what's really upsetting to me. That, like, there's all these things that I'm hearing from people behind the scenes, right, that would have me believe that the story that I published is correct. But publicly, these people who are not going to lie on air, like Tom Pelissero, right, are saying things like, well, I'm hearing, maybe not. And then Sid Hartman is doing his Sid Hartman thing, so maybe don't pay attention to him. But he is well connected, and he does say that if the Vikings guarantee Adrian Peterson's salary, he's staying with the Vikings. That doesn't seem to be the case. Charles Robinson and Tom Pelissero both said that Peterson has, very specific, very large non-money concerns, that guaranteeing the contract would maybe help paper over, but would not definitively resolve the issue. But yeah, I mean, there are people who I would not call liars who have publicly stated the opposite based on their conversations. But I've had a bunch of private conversations that tell me that I am correct on this. And I haven't heard from one person privately whose opinion I would trust. And the reason I add that qualifier is because I have had like emails from like fans of the Vikings that do not even claim to have a source. They just tell me I'm wrong. So aside from those people, I've not had a private conversation with someone who says that my report is inaccurate. The other side to this is that it is also unlikely that someone will want to back channel me to start a fight, right? Like if like some writer for the Star Tribune was like, I checked in with my people and Arif's report is totally inaccurate, they probably would not direct message me and go, man, you're a noob, right? So that's the other side of it, that there's like a natural selection bias for the people who talk to me about the story. But still, it's unusual that every indication that I've had about the story is that the story is accurate. So to say, I mean, like, I think the smartest takeaway based on what we know is that the Vikings are confused internally. I think my gut, and that is a very inaccurate tool, obviously. My gut is that the Vikings want to get rid of Adrian Peterson. But like, I don't think that you can take, like, as an external observer, I don't think you can take a look at everything that's been happening and come away with a conclusion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just because what's been happening has been so, confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, like I think that if you looked at it and absorbed all the information, you would come to I think the most likely conclusion you would come to is that the Vikings are confused internally. But again, my gut has a bias. It wants to think that I'm correct, but I do think that I'm correct that the Vikings have wanted to get rid of Adrian Peterson for quite some time. And that I mean, someone told me he's done, like those two words, right? It's been very strong language. It's been definitive and explicit, and it's been confirmed by follow-up information that I've had. And so, to me, based on my interactions, and it's very easy for me to trust the interactions I have over the interactions that someone I mostly trust has with someone else who I don't know who they are, right? So it's very easy for me to trust the interactions I've had. It's more difficult for you to trust the interactions that I've had, just like it's more difficult for me to trust the interactions Tom has had, or that Darren's had, or that Master Tesfatsian has had, you know? And so, to my gut, because of our natural cognitive bias for trusting basically what we see versus what other people tell us they see, is that we're going to move on. But it's very difficult for me to think that someone else looking at the situation comes away with a take other than the Vikings are probably confused internally. That's my breakdown of the media on this Adrian thing.
And there you have it. Shall we engage with free agency and go from one obviously confused topic to what appear to be several confused topics?
Yeah, if there's anything more confusing than this Adrian drama, it's what's been happening in free agency in the past 24 hours. Whew.
Well, and Twitter doesn't help either. I mean, they even got poor James. The Norse Code Twitter account tweeted out a rumor that Vince Wilfork was being traded to the Packers, but that was being...
See that one.
Well, it's okay. It was being promulgated by a fake Ian Rappaport account, Rappaport with two P's.
Oh, wow. I didn't even, I hadn't even muted that one. Interesting.
Well, I guess Rappaport with three P's, technically.
Well, right.
But at any rate, fake Ian Rappaport account got James, and, the Daily Norseman put out a PSA, if you haven't blocked or reported Adar and Schefter, then this is a friendly reminder to do so, because the fake Twitter accounts. I mean, you sports journalists out there, and us sports enthusiasts rely on Twitter for the up to the minute stuff. I mean, Adam Schefter broke as much news as he could on Twitter today. It was blowing up all afternoon with draft stuff, and these guys really do a decent job of muddying the waters, maybe less so among journalists and more so among enthusiasts of what's really going on.
Yeah, I mean, it really bothers me because there are people who think that this is like a form of media literacy training for fans. I don't think so. That's not a form of media literacy if you intentionally deceive, people into believing your shitty report.
Don't try to make trolling noble. Come on.
Exactly. Like, that's what it is. Come on. Right? There's like forms of parody and satire that are probably, backwards ways into teaching people about media literacy. But like literally all this is just trolling. And so...
See, it's actually about ethics in video game journalism. But no, it's just trolling. It's really freaking annoying. But I think in part the media literacy training thing, like it's annoying when people call it that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it kind of is that, and it helps that there are as soon as James tweeted out the fake Vince Wilfork information. A bunch of people replied back, it's fake, it was a fake. Some of these people were, a couple of them were journalists. And I use air quotes around journalists, but most of them were just, sports enthusiasts. These are just people who, follow the show and follow sports and are like, nope, that account is fake account. And I mean, I know that that is not like, it's not an excuse for trolling, but it's nice to know that the troll patrol is out in force on days like today. And that if Twitter as a company is unwilling to punish obvious trolls and deal with abuse of its platform, at least in some ways, the community can kind of step in and fact check itself.
Yeah, but it's always like an after the fact thing, which is kind of annoying. Like it's nice that people are like becoming hyper aware of the possibility of this. I mean, like now, um, the only time I retweet a breaking account like Schefter or Ed Werder on occasion or Jason Lockenfora, um, is when they show up in my list, my like breaking news list, and then I retweet from the list. And every time I see a report being broken by someone not on the list, I mean that happens a lot because there's a bunch of local journalists that get the news before the national guys. The only time I retweet them is when I see that blank retweet, when I don't see this was retweeted by thing. So I don't retweet retweets during free agency, which is annoying because there's a lot of stuff happening. So I have to like
Yeah, that
check
must,
things. Yeah.
you have to fact check yourself. You all of a sudden have this. I mean, do you feel like a higher obligation to, keep your feed clean of potentially incorrect or misbegotten retweets?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Like I feel like I should, I guess, know better. I don't know. Last year I was kind of bad about it. I got maybe 4 or 5 times during free agency, and this time I only got once, and it was 4 days before free agency, and it was by a new fake Ian Rappaport account, Rap Shield. They replaced the T with the L. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah. The best fake account, which I was able to block before I got tricked. This is extraordinary. Pro Football Talks, the fake one is they've changed all of the L's into capital I's, and so when all of them are changed, it's actually really difficult to tell the
Because
difference
it
between the
because it
L's and
looks
the
like
I's.
pro foot by Tyke.
Right, but like
Ha.
when all the letters are changed, it definitely looks like an L. When one letter is changed, you can tell the difference between an I and an L. When all the letters are changed, it's very difficult. And so I keep on and they have like Florio's style because it always has like an additional bit of snark, but like nothing like Florio doesn't like swear right on his feed. Some of these fake accounts will like they'll cuss or whatever, and then you're like, oh well, obviously, or they'll like have weird capitalization or they misspell names, which doesn't happen very often with units for the professional accounts. But this Pro Football Talk account was really good, and I'm glad I blocked it before free agency started or before I retweeted them. Because I mean that one's tough.
Could have been a whole lot worse.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and I muted them, so I didn't see them in my tweet deck. Um, but based on the other tweets I saw, um, it definitely looked like a bunch of people were tricked early in free agency by that. It's just incredible because they were like talking about deals that I didn't see hit my feed, and I was like, "What happened?" And so I like, fire up the search box, and I'm like, I don't know, Will Fork Packers or whatever, and I search it and I find it, and I find it tweeted by a professional account, and so I click on the professional account. I'm just like, I don't, they should be in my list. I don't see it, so I click on it and I see that they're fake. So I see this has happened a couple of times to other people because that one's a good one. And that one's a new one. Rap Shield is a new one that was pretty good. I can't think of any new ones. Adar and Schefter has been around for a while. Because for a while there were only parody accounts of Adam Schefter. There weren't parody accounts of like Pro Football Talk, or I haven't seen a Jay Glazer one, which is kind of ridiculous because he's considered like the most reliable insider. He just doesn't break news as often as Schefter. But like he would be a good one to fake, right? Jake
Maybe
Glazer, right?
you'd really have to pick your spot because,
Yeah.
I mean, among professionals, Glazer has that reputation as somebody who is super reliable, doesn't break a whole ton of stories, only sticks his head out when, he's pretty sure he's got, actual news.
Right,
And
yeah,
so
because he drops bombs.
yeah, and so if he were to drop like 3 bombs in 3 days, or even his first one would be so heavily scrutinized just because of the source it's supposedly coming from, that yeah, I think you could, that first one would have to be a doozy. I think you could really fool a lot of people for like a little while,
Yeah.
and that would be exciting if you were a troll. But beyond that, I don't know. I actually I agree with our regular listener and Twitter battle engager Jesse Silva. I think your account would actually be a good one to make a fake of, just given how prolific you are and how many followers you have. Although I was playing around with the various, capitalized and uncapitalized letters, and it's hard to come up with a good bowdlerization or bastardization of Arif Hassan NFL that's as good as Adar Schefter or Rapshiel or Ian Rappaport with 3 Ps. Like,
In the Pro Football Talk one. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
I've been thinking about this. The only thing I can think of, so someone replaced the N in Hassan with M. That one was decent.
that was okay.
And then I thought that if you just got rid of the N, so it's still Arif Hassan NFL, but without the N and Hassan,
So it
that's
looked like
okay.
the way that people say it.
Right, exactly. I thought that would be a good one. So, to my knowledge, no one has created a parody account of me yet, which is
um,
interesting
I
because people keep talking about it.
I looked at Arit Hassan, not really quite right.
Yeah.
Uh, the if even if in the sans serif font, the T doesn't look enough like an F. I tried Arelf Hassan, like using a lowercase L instead of a lowercase I.
I don't think that's gonna work.
Yeah, not really. You would think they would be passable, but they're not.
What if you change the R into an N? That's probably not gonna work.
No, it's too short because there's space around the I, and you can tell it's only 3 letters. Like
Oh,
that's
okay.
that's why Adar and Schefter works so well.
Right, because
It's
there's no
it's an
space
extra
between.
letter, and there's just like that tiny little bit of kerning between the R and the N. Like,
And you can't change the capitals at all because you can't change the A into an H, right? That would get people. Um, God, that's
I guess maybe you might be able to take advantage of white people's just lack of awareness about Middle Eastern names and do Hassan with 2 S's. It seemed to work for Rappaport.
yeah. You could definitely do that.
Oh no! Well, we may have created a monster.
Yeah, well,
Well, luckily, anyone listening to this show will already know that account is fake. Oh boy. For all of your free agency needs, I wanted to highlight this before we dive in. And it's not necessarily just Vikings related free agency stuff. It's a pretty comprehensive live blog. But you are for some reason, live blogging pretty much all of free agency at VikingsTerritory.com.
yeah. And I did this last year in a less user friendly format because it's on a page that we got to format just for live blogging, and I think it looks awesome. Um, but I did this last year, and I realized while I was doing it last year that it's just easy to get into free agency creep, basically, because every signing that a team makes has a potential impact on the Vikings, especially last year when the Vikings had a need everywhere. Um, and this year you could argue they've got like enough needs at enough positions that you could do it anyway. But like for example, when the Colts signed Frank Gore, or when it was announced that they probably maybe came to terms with Frank Gore, or whatever, right? Um, and I blogged about it because it had Adrian Peterson trade implications. But even better, when the Arizona Cardinals signed Mike Iupati, I could blog about it and say this has trade implications about Adrian Peterson in 2 different ways, because it could either mean they're really investing in run blocking because Iupati is a run blocking guard. He's not very good in pass protection. Uh, and so they're putting together a package that works really well with Adrian Peterson, or, they're consuming the cap space they cleared to sign Adrian Peterson because that is an expensive contract. And you don't even have to limit it to just the 5 with Peterson, right? The 5 teams that he said he was going to restructure for, because San Francisco is rumored to have shown interest, right? Some people have said, hey, Miami's a good fit. I don't think it is. But some people have said Miami's a good fit. The Philadelphia Eagles are up there, right? Because they want an inside the tackles runner. They lost Frank Gore. They're evidently in the DeMarco Murray market, which is shocking to me. The only reason that I think you could even consider Adrian Peterson to the Eagles is because you could consider DeMarco Murray to the Eagles. I don't think you can even consider that. That feels fake to me, but like 3 other people have reported it, including the real Ian Rappaport and I think Rand Getlin. It's so confusing because Chip Kelly's approach in the last 2.5 years of the Eagles has been to reduce big money contracts on offense, get rid of talent on offense, and invest heavily into talent on defense because he's not very good at defense. He doesn't take care of the defense. He doesn't even approach the defense. He just doesn't care. Like when he was at Oregon, his Aliotti, the defensive coordinator there before he retired, he was asked one year, like, hey, so what's it like being the defensive coordinator for a genius and also like a weird program? And he's like, I've never had more autonomy in my life. It's like Chip Kelly just doesn't care about defense, so he doesn't trust the scheme to take care of the defense. So he invests a lot of money in the defense. You can see that with the moves this year, even. Because they were really in on Byron Maxwell, and they got him on a 6-year, $63 million deal. They were in on Devin McCourty. They evidently offered even more money than the Patriots did, who offered $9.5 million per year. So they're investing money on the defense, and they're shedding money on the offense. They got rid of LaShawn McCoy. They got rid of Todd Herremans. They were rumored to want to drop Evan Mathis. He's only on like a $6 million deal, and he's the best guard in the NFL. It's kind of weird to say you want to get rid of him. They didn't match Kansas City's offer for Jeremy Maclin. Although Kansas City's offer was kind of absurd in its own. It was like $11 million a year. They got rid of Deshaun Jackson last year or 2 years ago. So they've been getting rid of contracts on offense and establishing them on defense and trusting the scheme to just make things happen. So why would they invest in DeMarco Murray?
Well, that segues neatly into my first kind of LOL moment of free agency. They also got rid of Nick Foles.
Yeah, that's not even money. That's just
like what? What?
That's I don't know. So the thing is, abstractly, I don't really think that getting rid of Nick Foles is a bad idea. I think he's a bad quarterback with a good year 2 years ago. He's also coming off an injury, and when Mark Sanchez outperforms you, you have issues. And also, he got like hidden by luck in a lot of ways. His statistics are a lot better than his play. And he got hidden by ease of offense. You know how Christian Ponder had a pretty good yards per attempt at the beginning of 2012 because he got all of that yard after contact on screen passes?
Well, yeah, and all that stuff was, I think, by design. I mean, that's part of working in a Chip Kelly offense. Emphasize scheme over freakish talent, and as long as your quarterback can go through his targets reasonably well, then they'll be able to drop a play for him, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so if you're performing badly in that system, then you're easily replaceable, which is why you could get rid of Nick Foles. So abstractly, it makes sense to me that they would want to get rid of Nick Foles, especially because of other teams perceive that he has value. It does not make sense to me for the Eagles to do what they did. I'm so lost, right? Okay, so for listeners who are not aware of the parameters of this deal, which, by the way, the time between when the trade was announced and when people understood the terms of the trade is perhaps longer than any other trade I've heard of.
It's like up there with with Kaepernick signing his contract. Like, it was announced, and then it kind of took a while for people to really get their hands around it.
Yeah, but I think the details of the Kaepernick contract were available kind of quickly. Not that quickly, but like kind of quickly, and they were like explainable. It just didn't spread. I think the issue with this is that people were initially fed incorrect information. They spread that. And then they were given the correct information, but they wanted to spread it through Twitter. And it's a pretty complicated sounding deal. So it's very difficult to spread through Twitter. And then they wanted to spread it through sound bites on TV, which at one point Ian Rappaport was like, I'm not doing that. This trade is I'm just not going to tell you. Go to NFL.com. I've written it up. Which I thought was hilarious. but yeah, and so like people wanted to explain it, and it's a relatively complicated. And so people kept on getting like these weird terms, and I heard like 4 different conditions. But at the end of the day, this is what happened: the Eagles gave up Nick Foles and their 4th round draft pick from this year, and their 2nd round draft pick from next year. They definitely gave that up. The Rams gave up their 5th round draft pick from this year and Sam Bradford. They definitely gave that up. That is immutable. That's part of the deal. Then there are conditions. If Sam Bradford does not play a single down for the Eagles, and the reason doesn't matter, it was misreported, people talked about the reason, it doesn't matter, then the Rams provide the Eagles with their 2016 3rd round pick. So people talking about getting back picks, don't talk about that. That's confusing. People talking about why Sam Bradford may not play, don't talk about that. That's confusing. They're not important parts of the deal either. People kept on saying, if Sam Bradford gets injured, this happens. Doesn't really matter. Then the other condition is, if Sam Bradford plays less than 8 games or 8 games or fewer, one of the two. I don't know whether or not it's inclusive of 8 or not, but I think it is inclusive of 8. So actually, if he plays 8 games or fewer, then he will then the Eagles will receive a 4th round draft pick in 2016 from the Rams. So in a situation where the Eagles cannot succeed with Sam Bradford and they bench him, right? They will get some compensation back. In a situation where Sam Bradford is unable to play for whatever reason, they'll get greater compensation back. So that's the deal, which has opened up the possibility, weirdly enough, that Sam Bradford could be traded again before the season starts during the draft as an asset to move up for Marcus Mariota, which is hilarious and doesn't make any sense, and that can't possibly be true. But it does open up the possibility that he could be traded, and that triggers the 3rd round pick part of the deal, where they trade Sam Bradford for whatever he's worth, plus they get a 3rd round pick in 24. Like that would be weird, right?
What trading for Sam Bradford to try and eventually get to Marcus Mariota is like as overly complicated as the robot devil's plans to get his hands back in what was supposed to be the last episode of Futurama.
Do you think maybe Chip Kelly read the book about the red paperclip guy?
He's on a Craigslist tour of the country trying to find an object large and valuable enough to trade for Marcus Mariota. Or at least the number 1 pick in the draft so that he could draft Marcus Mariota. That's it's entirely possible. Does he have a red paperclip? Because he won't get anywhere without that first crucial item.
I don't think he does.
Well, that's unfortunate. I'm looking forward to seeing how that shakes out because, talk about just a move that makes little sense on face, especially given the scheme that, well, I mean, I guess less the scheme, but just given how Sam Bradford doesn't have any knees. Like, you need a quarterback.
Well, in theory.
Is it is it really going to be Sam Bradford? I mean, gosh, dog.
You know who the Eagles should sign? They should figure out a way to get Brad Smith. I don't know if he's under contract, if he's a free agent, or if he's retired. But a combination quarterback, wide receiver, kick returner, and running back sounds perfect for the
Eagles. No, that's I like it. That's some good out of the box thinking, which is what Chip Kelly specializes in.
At some point, so he's like aggressively Belichickian, right? We can acknowledge that.
Okay.
So like at some point, Chip Kelly's going to have his Belichick with the Browns moment. Maybe it just happened with the LaShawn McCoy trade. Because Belichick benched Bernie Kosar, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a little early, but also he was bad. But also the backup quarterback that he benched before was worse, so who knows? And that was like confidence born of hubris. And while Belichick should be confident in himself, maybe that was a bridge too far. So maybe Kelly has this Belichick with the Browns moment, and the Eagles won't let him recover because he's driven them into the ground. Maybe, who knows? Maybe he's like a friggin' genius still, and we're all like 2 steps behind.
Do you think he might have enough rope to hang himself?
Right. But like maybe not. Maybe he's going to see this one through and he's going to end up in the playoffs or whatever. Which, like, again, the only reason you can give him that, like, if Joe Banner did this when he was with the Cleveland Browns, nobody would have been like, well, he's got a plan. He's got a long-term plan. You'd be like, well, he's a moron. But Kelly has this reputation that I think he deserves a little bit of leeway. But maybe that reputation has encouraged him to make the kinds of moves that are going to get him fired anyway. And so he has to rebound with another team that he turns into a 10-year dynasty. That would be interesting.
Wow. That is very bold.
That's what Belichick did.
I mean, yeah.
He created the best front office in history, got fired, front office breaks apart, Ozzie Newsome becomes like the best GM in the NFL. Belichick becomes the best combination coach in the NFL. Nick Caserio becomes a phenomenal GM. Scott Pioli becomes a great GM. Thomas Dimitroff becomes a great GM. Well, I guess Atlanta fans might disagree with that at the end. But, that was an incredible coaching staff and personnel staff with the Browns in '95. Before, everybody moved, to Baltimore. But yeah, I mean, put together this amazing staff, and they're so amazing they drove themselves into the ground and got fired.
They just weren't right for the system. It was the the coaching staff that Cleveland needed, but not the one it wanted right then.
That's true, man. So someone tweeted this out earlier. Might have been Mike Florio. It was a pretty good tweet. This really does make the movie Draft Day seem more plausible.
Right.
God, what an awful movie. Yeah. Man, it's been a day. We haven't even talked about the Vikings other than Adrian Peterson, who I guess is like a relatively important piece of the puzzle.
Oh, that's true. So yeah, for all of your, free agency updates, Vikings or not, because, free agency creep. Make sure you check out the free agency live blog on Vikings territory. The Daily Norseman has an excellent Minnesota Vikings free agency tracker where they've got a neat little table embedded in the page that has updates on each individual player who is either coming back to the Vikings, who has left the Vikings, who is going to be new this year for the Vikings. And the list doubled at the beginning of free agency today. Colin Loeffler had already signed. Does it matter if we pick up another long snapper? I mean, can we just keep Loeffler until his arm falls off, or what? I mean, I know he's getting old. What are the potential replacement options? Is that a position that you want to draft or trade for somebody particularly skilled, or will any old hand do? What?
Long snapper is not a position that you draft for, and it's not a position that you trade for. But there's always an undrafted free agent that you could take a look at. So I talked to the only person I know that I would consider a long snapper enthusiast. I don't even know if I should call him an expert, because he hasn't long snapped, which is stupid, right? Because I can't be well, you haven't played the game. But who does know a lot about long snapping? Anyway, I talked to this guy at PFF. His name's Gordon McGinnis. He's very into special teams. And I asked him, Colin Loeffler, is he bad? And if he's bad, why is he bad? Because he has a very low PFF score, right? So I'm what's the deal? And he's well, the deal with Colin Loeffler getting a low score is that he's extremely inconsistent. He was extremely inconsistent this year. It's more than just the Miami game. Remember when there was a really bad long snap and Miami scored on a game-winning punt block in the end zone? It's more than just that. The punter or the holder have to adjust significantly more with Colin Loeffler than they do normally. It's off target and it's mistimed a lot. The timing isn't accurate, which would speak to, I guess, what you would call long snapping velocity. But it doesn't get to the punter or holder at the right time. It's either too fast or too slow, usually a little too slow. And it's not accurate. And it's actually a super difficult skill to cultivate, even though it looks like one of the easiest things. But yeah, I mean, if it's not accurate, obviously that creates a lot of risks in terms of fumbles created, but it also makes it extremely difficult to punt or hold because you have to adjust to the right amount of time. Ray Guy was probably one of the best at recovering bad long snaps. And apocryphally, he never had a punt blocked. That's not true. He's had punt blocked, but he's extremely good at it. I will say this about Chris Cluey. He did become a bad punter after Mike Prefer started coaching him, like at the same time, coincidentally. But he was really good at corralling bad long snaps. And so maybe we didn't notice it. And I think like here the Vikings need to find a way to get a new long snapper. I asked this guy, I was like, hey, so are there any long snappers that are, I don't know, free agents? Just like kind of like a weird thing to talk about. And he's like, well, yeah, so there's this, the only one that I would say a team would want is the Ravens long snapper who spent most of the year on injured reserve. I already forgot his name, so obviously I was paying a bunch of attention to this conversation. But yeah, like that's the option. And I was like, so college long snappers, are there, because that's a thing, right? There's like, now colleges are giving scholarships to long snappers specifically, and long snappers that in high school learned how to long snap and went to long snapping camps set up across the country in the summer. So there's a growing talent pool of long snappers. And like USC has committed a person who's only a long snapper. Alabama's committed a person who's only a long snapper. Texas has committed a person who's only a long snapper. They're all getting scholarships. They're not walk-ons. So there should be an expanding talent pool. And I was like, so have you seen any college long snappers that are like worth inviting to camp and like competing with Leffler? And the guy was like, not in any of the games I've seen. So I guess bad class for them. It's a bad long snapper class, guys. I'm sorry. And so there's not really an option, but it's a 1-year deal. So I can't imagine the Vikings are like super hyped about having to bring Leffler back. I imagine he'll get competition in camp. They'll probably bring back that Colin Anderson guy, the tight end from Furman, who's competing with at long snapper with the Vikings like 2 years ago. And they'll probably bring in like other long snappers to compete with them. Yeah, if you remember, there's this Raiders Chargers game where a long snapper went down. Disaster. They should never have attempted a punt after that. The Raiders got waxed on special teams.
So it turns out you do need them.
You do need them, and they're very hard to find. If you don't have one, you're boned. But it is long snapping. Like I don't know what to tell you.
So we are not boned, is what I can take away from this.
Yeah, he's like bad, and that creates like problems with like field position because that makes Jeff Locke, who's a bad punter, worse.
Makes him worse, yeah. A lot of 40-yard punts.
And one could argue that this was a contributor to what people would call a down season for Blair Walsh. I think that argument would make sense. I haven't watched Blair Walsh's kicks this year, especially with that in mind. So, but one could argue that that is related, potentially. So, obviously, a position the Vikings need to pay attention to. It would make me really happy if it was on Rick Spielman's 8 things we need to take care of list, because no one called that, right? Because people are like, Rick Spielman said they need to take care of 8 things. Let's like figure them out from this list. And if long snapper was one of them, nobody called it, and that would be amazing.
Rick Spielman knows we need a long snapper real bad. Wow. Joe Berger back for 2 more years, per Daily Norseman.
Yeah, $2.15 million. I was hesitant about the Berger re-signing just because of all of the reports that he wanted starter money and that the agent was super happy with the deal that they eventually worked out. And I was like, oh, God, no. He doesn't deserve starter money. He's a really good backup. I don't want to give him like $3.5 million, $4 million a year. That's insane. That's what starter money and guard is to me. because it's like what
Well,
4 million to 8 million. Don't have to worry about
he
that.
must be happy. Yeah, because he's not getting that.
Yeah,
He's getting
he's. I
close.
would argue that he's slightly overpaid, but not to the point where I would gripe about it. So he's getting like 1.075 million on average per year, and that's including signing bonuses. That's including roster bonuses and workout bonuses. His base salary is a little bit lower, but a high end backup guard typically goes for about $150,000 to $200,000 more than the veteran's minimum. Joe Berger, a 9-year vet, would get an $870,000 veterans minimum. So that actually works out. It's still, I think, a tad high for a backup guard, but it's a good deal for the Vikings, which is nice.
Um, who do we wanna do next? I guess Tom Johnson.
Great signing, fantastic signing. I already forgot the terms of the deal. Great signing though.
So great, it made me forget all about it.
Well, yeah. So I forgot the numbers. I just remember not being upset at them. I think.
7 million for 3 years, 1.5 million signing bonus with 3 million guaranteed.
Right. So I imagine the first year has a $1.5 million salary guarantee. So the Vikings could cut him basically at any time for a minimal-ish. Nah, it would be a $2 million cap hit next year and a $1 million one the year after that. So not that minimal dead money, but the Vikings have that ability. But yeah, he was fantastic. He was the best defensive tackle on the team for the first 6 weeks of the season, and until Sharif Floyd became Sharif Floyd, which was also nice to see. And at that point, Tom Johnson had turned into a very, very serviceable rotational defensive tackle. There's not many defensive tackles that actually do get 6 sacks. Like it's kind of a lot for a defensive tackle. There's definitely not that many backup defensive tackles that get 6 sacks, and they weren't necessarily all that fluky either. I mean, they were. He combined it with a really high rate of pressures and a very good rate of hits, and so he consistently put pressure on the quarterback. As a backup defensive tackle, that's a lot to ask for, and he delivered. I am a huge fan of the signing. It is a little bit long for a person his age, right? Because he's like 30, I think. But it's really cheap. It's really good for a rotational defensive tackle with the impact that he has. And I think it gives Vikings flexibility for the rest of the free agent market, because otherwise they would end up talking to, like maybe Kendall Langford, or a lot of these other like defensive tackles in the market, maybe Pat Sims, who probably would command more money and or would command similar money, but are probably not known to be effective with the way the Vikings are set up. So I'm really happy with the signing.
No, it seems like a big win for everybody. Johnson gets to get paid, a little more after having the best season of his career, and he gets to play with a team that will, appreciate him. He'll get plenty of playing time with the Vikings. He fits in with the scheme pretty well. I dig it. Thumbs up.
Yeah, all right.
Vikings are doing a pretty good job keeping it cheap in free agency. Matt Asiata signed to a less than $1 million contract. I think his base salary is like $750,000, and then it's all loaded up with workout bonuses and performance bonuses and stuff.
Yeah, it's heavily indexed to incentives for rushing yards, receiving yards, and like touchdowns. And I assume there's multiple escalators. Like I assume it's not you hit a mark and then you get all $800,000 of your incentives. I assume that there's it escalates. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I made fun of the signing a lot on Twitter, but on the live blog and on the Bleacher Report, I noted that actually I do think that this is a good thing for the Vikings, because he's useful in very specific situations. It just so happens that the Vikings often did not use him in those situations, but it means you have a backup fullback, which it's good to have backups of things. And you've got a guy who is a more consistent runner than even Adrian Peterson, who makes up for some of those inconsistencies by being explosive and amazing. Asiata is more likely to get you 2 yards on 3rd and 2, which is kind of like a weird thing to think about given who Adrian Peterson is. But that's been true. And Asiata ranked 6th out of all running backs in Football Outsiders' 2014 success rate metric. And so he got the required yardage that they needed from him a lot. And there's always use for that in an offense. So I like the signing. It's heavily indexed to bonuses that he's not likely going to hit. And if he hits them, even better. So I made fun of it a lot, but I think it's a good signing.
So we, I guess not really famously, but we both kind of scratched our heads at the idea that Matt Castle may not play for the Vikings next season. But in the intervening week, it's, out with Castle, who is off to Buffalo, and in with former Viking Sean Hill.
Yeah. We were pretty skeptical of the Castle trade because, I mean, $4.5 million is kind of high for a backup quarterback, and that's what he would have been. And that's it. And having a backup quarterback is so much better, right? And slightly overpaying him than not having one and being more efficient with your money elsewhere. It's so much better to have a backup quarterback. We're pretty askance at the trade, but signing a quarterback like Sean Hill, who I think Matt Castle is likely to be in an average system a better quarterback than Sean Hill, who also, by the way, like 35, right? So there's not like a lot of wiggle room for him to get better. But I do think that Sean Hill is a better caretaker of the offense. By that, I mean that the way that he plays is much more within the system and much less turnover prone than Castle. Because I think people forget this about Castle. He is wildly inconsistent. And people talk about him as a game manager when I think what they mean to say is mediocre. Because
Don't worry, we remember bad Matt Castle.
yeah,
We know bad Matt Castle.
right. But when people say game manager, they're like someone who takes care of the ball, someone who like takes the short pass, someone.
Yeah, no, it implies consistency,
Right.
which
And
Castle's not that.
yeah, when you are saying game manager in the context of Matt Castle, all you're saying is he's mediocre. And that's true, but he's also wildly inconsistent. His best games are extremely good. Pretty rare, that's why he's bad. But extremely good. And his bad games are clunkers. They're just awful. And it's because he takes a lot of risks and he's not very good. And so when you take a lot of risks and you're not very good, these things happen. Sean Hill was much better at avoiding interceptions and making sure that, like, I've said this before, but I think kind of the quality you want in a backup quarterback, aside from the help that they can provide in the film room and on the sideline, the quality that you want is somebody who can enter halfway through a game when you're up by 7 points and still come out with a win. There's not actually that many quarterbacks that can do that because the cognitive demands in the position are ridiculous. But if you can have a guy that can win a game at halftime, you had a 7-point lead most of the time, then you've got a good backup quarterback. And I think that's what Sean Hill is. I don't think most teams in the NFL have that in the backup quarterback, which is actually kind of depressing.
I have heard on various podcasts and, the tweeter that Sean Hill is on the Vikings, well, partly because he cost, about half as much per year as Matt Castle. I think he's guaranteed $2.2 million this year or something.
Yeah, but his base salary is a little bit higher than that. He gets, I think his average is $3.5 million a year. Still, save $1 million. That's great.
Yeah. It's $6.5 million over 2 years with $3 million guaranteed. It's still cheaper, even averaged out. But I think people are, insinuating that Hill was not brought to the Vikings to be a quarterback, but rather, somebody on the team and in the locker room to support Teddy Bridgewater, to be like a mentor and a resource for him from the bench. Like he was brought to the Vikings with the expectation, or the hope at least, that he would never play it down during the season.
Right. I mean, yeah. I don't really want to dispute that. Here's the thing about backup quarterbacks that I think I keep saying, but a lot of people, probably not our listeners because I keep saying it, but I think a lot of people kind of ignore or forget or don't care about or don't know. And I think actually the last part is probably the most likely for most people. backup quarterbacks are actually pretty important to the operation of a team because not because of whether or not they play downs or anything like that, because they'll do that too. They'll play if they need to play, but the service that they provide is a person who's watching the game as a quarterback that can provide functionally real-time live feedback to the quarterback that is actually starting about what they see, how to attack it. Basically sideline scouting stuff. There's not a lot of people that you can hire as a coach that can do that, especially because those people are not in the quarterback's room watching film earlier that week. Beyond that, they can break down film for quarterbacks. I think a veteran quarterback would be very good at, and typically is very good at, this is what teams value in veteran quarterbacks, in recognizing coverages pretty quickly and then telling people how to recognize keys in those coverages. And in doing so, provide additional education for a quarterback. I think Sean Hill is that. I think that's true, and I think that's why he's a really great backup. But the other thing is, he is signed because he's going to go into a game if Teddy Bridgewater is down. That is like another reason he has a contract. So it's not one reason or the other. I suspect it's the second reason most. I think that first reason does play a big role, though, because backup quarterbacks are very involved in game planning and game breakdown and functionally quarterback coaching. And he checks all those boxes.
Excellent. So, who remains for the Vikings on the interest list at Daily Norseman? Adrian Claiborne and George Selvey have met with the Vikings, or the Vikings have shown interest in them.
Yeah, they haven't met. They've shown interest in Claiborne and
Selvey. Chris Culliver, I think, falls into that same boat.
They've inquired. I think they haven't, at least the sports writers haven't indicated as much interest for Culliver as they have for Selvey and especially Claiborne. I mean, that's definitely, the Vikings were definitely interested in Claiborne. The Vikings have inquired about Chris Culliver. I don't know if they're interested in him, but they've inquired.
Safety / special teams guy Taylor Mays supposedly on the list.
Yep.
According to Matt Bensel on Twitter.
Yeah, that's right.
My favorite, though, and this is probably the biggest reach out of the five, safety Raheem Moore.
Yeah, that's the other story I broke. No one has confirmed it, and Paul Allen has denied it. So we'll see. The Vikings are genuinely interested. So when Paul Allen denied it, I was like, what the hell, man? Because Paul Allen's pretty well connected, right?
You're like, no, this ruins my whole...
Yeah, I was like, Jesus, are you serious? Because I heard about it 2 days ago. 2 days before I broke it, I mean. Not 2 days ago. 2 days before I broke it. And, I asked the guy, right before I broke it, am I cleared to break this? It's like, yeah. So I broke it. And a couple hours later, Paul Allen was like, no, they have shown I believe they have no interest. I believe they have very little interest or no interest at all. And I was like, Jesus, what? Why? And so
Her Majesty's Royal Beatdown.
Yeah, and I was like, I was like to my dude, I was like, come on, really, man? And
you're killing me.
And he's like, well, I mean, they were interested when you asked, and I was like, thanks.
Whoa, ouch.
What changed? And he's like, well, I'm not going to say the Vikings are not interested anymore. I'm like, oh, thanks, man. But
this guy's doing all kinds of favors,
right? And I mean, and this conversation went a lot more cordially than I'm gussing it up for the drama of a podcast. But mostly I'm just like, well, okay, so this is great. But he's like, the Vikings are concerned that his market is better for him than originally anticipated, which makes sense because the reason I was given that they were interested in Raheem Moore is not just because he was young and talented, which he is, both of those things, but also because he was expected to be undervalued by the market by a significant degree. I think Mike Kliss at the Denver Post actually wrote an article right before, at the end of December, right before the playoffs, that Raheem Moore was likely to get $5 million a year from a team. And that's a great deal. I would totally, and I bet the Vikings would love that, right? I bet, Of course, yeah. Let's sign him for 5 million a year. Let's do that. Then we'll have like an elite pair of safeties and an elite cornerback and eat it. We're gonna be awesome. For like 5 million a year. That's great. And so I think maybe the Vikings were thinking that he would also receive a poor market. Um, and so uh, they maintain their interest, according to this guy, right? I'm like, well, okay. So they maintain their interest. But the reason that they would be interested has changed. Um, that part is not according to this guy, right? And so they had a price point for more that was relatively low, and that has maybe potentially changed. And so when I broke the story, and then when it was denied by Allen, obviously not the Vikings, but by Allen, um, then I think the issue is that the salary demands got too high. So the Raheem Moore one is a rumor that I guess I started based on the information that I had, and that has not been confirmed by anyone in the Twin Cities media, um, and has been denied by Paul Allen. So that one's kind of shaky, I would say.
And just, I mean, if your instincts are correct and it is a question of, salary or, a sudden loss of perceived value because his stock is going up, that probably means that Devin McCourty is, out of the running as well. And we're not going to make a massive upgrade at safety and free agency, right?
Well, he did already sign with the Patriots, Devin McCourty.
Oh, okay, okay. See, I'm behind the
Yeah.
times. I looked away from Twitter for a minute.
Yeah, well, that was your mistake.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the thing with McCourty is that the Vikings were interested. Every team basically was interested. Vikings were interested. So they inquired. And as McCourty started bargaining in his services, the Vikings bowed out early because the price got too high. Their cutoff point was actually, so it was reported as $7 million. And what the person who reported it meant to say was below 8 million. So like 7.9 would have been fine, for example. But it was initially reported as $7 million. It's actually a little bit more than $7 million a year was their price point for McCourty, which makes me think that they weren't seriously pushing for McCourty, which is fine, right? But man, the Vikings would have looked stupid if McCourty had signed for like the $7 million a year deal. The Vikings didn't even try to get him. So it's top safety in the market. The Vikings provided what they thought they could do, and because they have to extend Harrison Smith this offseason, they're probably very sensitive to the idea of committing too much money at a position. And so they had a low price point for McCourty. McCourty met that and then quite a bit more. And so the Vikings were never really in the market. So I don't think the Vikings were genuinely interested in McCourty. I think they were doing due diligence.
they just had to make an offer, a token offer.
Yeah, because you can't say you didn't try if he signs for this absurdly cheap deal somewhere.
Oh, that's fair. So there's not a whole lot of news on the draft front this week.
There wouldn't be. There's some pro days, which cool.
Tim Tebow wants to have a pro day.
I think he actually was invited to the veteran combine.
Yep.
Vince Young was not. So sad.
Well, Vince Young hasn't been working with a quarterbacks coach to try and fix, I guess, still lingering problems with his mechanics. And said coach says that Tim Tebow can now throw a nice tight spiral. So
Tim Tebow's always been able to throw a nice tight spiral. It's just in practice. And not all the time in practice. Well, okay.
It's true.
So that's the reason he never started for the Jets, is because he could never throw a tight spiral in practice. But in the offseason, he's really good at that.
Well, we shall see. I really think he belongs in the CFL. I mean, I know he has expressed a desire to never want to play in the CFL, but I really think that would be a better fit for him.
Well, the only CFL team to express interest in him said he could be a backup.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also in fairness, that CFL coach had just won the Grey Cup, so it's not like he was going to displace his starting quarterback after winning the Grey Cup. But yeah, he was like, "Yeah, no, we've."
Who's this guy? Some reject? Sure, he can be our backup.
Yeah. Some dude.
Let's see. I suppose we can just skip right on to the number of the week then.
Cool. Let's do it. It's the number of the week.
4.
I don't know why I sighed exasperately. It's not like another number would have drawn it.
Ugh. 7. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, that's great. That's
That's a way better number than 4.
4. Man, I'm trying to guess. Normally I have
This
a
is
guess. I have no idea what this is.
this is just random Vikings factoid that I ran into over the course of the week. Uh, Comes by way of Mike Wapshall, actually.
So it's
In the
probably
first three
not the
days
number of
of
Super Bowls the Vikings have lost then.
ha no.
Yeah.
In the first 3 days of free agency last year, the Vikings signed 4 players who went on to start 11 plus games.
Oh, awesome. Captain Linval. Jesus, this is kind of hard. Free agents to sign. Really? Four?
In the first 3 days.
First 3 days. Oh,
Yep.
wow, I thought it was like the first day.
No.
So Captain and Linval. Um, who did they sign in free agency? Jesus. They signed Tom Johnson. He did not start 11 plus games or whatever. Is it 11 plus games?
Yes.
Okay. None of the safeties. Uh, he's not counting Everson Griffin, right? Because he was re-signed before free agency.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I hope he shouldn't be.
None of the. How many games did Vlad Dukas start? No, he can't be counting. And not the running backs, and not Charlie Johnson because I wasn't in the, or Charles Johnson because I was not in the first 3 days. Who are the other two?
Let's see.
Not a tight
It's
end.
not. It's not Thielen, is it?
No, he was on the practice squad.
Is it practice squad?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not Vladimir Dukas. He only started 3 games last season.
Oh, Mike Harris. How long was Phil Lodeholt injured? No, Mike Harris was a waiver wire pickup. That wouldn't have counted.
Let's see.
Good Lord, what is this?
Why can't we think of this? I wish I had.
Be including Everson Griffin.
He must be. Well, I will tweet at Wabi and be like, which 4?
Did Wabi ever say?
No, that was just a factoid that he launched on Twitter.
Have you looked at the replies? I'm super curious. I'm just gonna look it up right now.
Yeah, look up the replies. Get on that. I will attempt to do so, but I'm not very good with the tweet text search.
All right. So none of the replies have an answer. My favorite reply is each.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Man, I can't. Because, like, okay, so he doesn't say who, because I guess that's who he is. But the next tweet is also Vikings 14 free agency activity yielded team's top 2 in sacks, Griffin and Tom Johnson. So he has to be counting Griffin in that first tweet.
Yeah, so there's your 4: Griffin, Tom Johnson, Captain.
Tom Johnson
Limbaugh.
did not start 11 plus games.
Then I don't know what to tell you.
So Griffin, Linval, captain for sure, because he's counting Griffin. Were any of the offensive linemen free agents?
Uh,
I don't think Charlie Johnson was.
No, none of the various Johnsons count. I think we decided. Sully, no.
Khalil, obviously not. Phil,
no.
extension, so no. Brandon Fusco, no. Not Greg Jennings, obviously. Not Cordero Patterson, obviously. Not Jerick McKinnon was a draftee. Matt Asiata was under contract.
Jerome Felton?
No, because he restructured to stay with the Vikings.
Oh, yep.
I'm going to look this up on Spot Track. Okay, hold on. This is so weird. I can't think of the fourth. This is a good way to consume time on this podcast, too.
It's true. We were running a little short. I was thinking we might not have a 2-hour episode this week, but
we've pulled through. All right, so spottrack.com, 2014.
John Carlson?
But that's not 2014.
No, yeah, because he was signed in 2012 for a 5-year deal.
Let's see. So we signed. Oh, it is Charlie Johnson.
Oh,
really?
There you go. So
the hell did the Vikings sign Charlie Johnson to a new deal in 2014? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, his no, he wasn't what? Yeah. Oh my god.
Don't you feel silly?
That's so dumb. A, that Charlie Johnson was an answer, but B, that Charlie Johnson could be an answer.
I know. I thought he was disqualified because he didn't start 11 games. Shows how much I know.
Yeah, well, it was a stupid tweet anyway.
Well, at least we figured out the answer. So now we know which 4 free agents were big time starters last season.
Best part is like the responses to the tweet are just like, well, proves you don't need to be. It proves that the Vikings are active in free agency because they found 4 starters in free agency. They didn't find 4 starters. They found 2 and they re-signed 2.
And like yeah. I don't know that those guys were all, picked up in free agency like, oh good, we can't wait to have you start the whole season. Like, ugh,
I was pretty excited about Linval, I'll say that.
Yeah, no, I was stoked on captain. That was smart. I like that.
Yeah, so thanks, Wabi, for counting Charlie Johnson and Everson Griffin.
I know the Griffin one kind of that's an outlier. I don't think that should be.
Well, that and Griffin was like definitely signed before free agency started, so you can't even say the first 3 days of free agency.
He was technically a free agent.
Because he was signed when he was under contract with the Vikings. He was signed on the -1th day of free agency. Not even the 0th day, the -1th day.
He was signed on the I day of free agency.
Right.
That's great. Well, do you have a wildly irresponsible prognostication? Since the number of the week should actually have been 3.
It should have been 2. I'm not going to count Charlie Johnson.
All right, so the new number of the week is 2. The square root of 4.
Wildly irresponsible prognostication. It's like free agency, so it should be like a wildly irresponsible free agency prognostication, right?
Yeah, or you could do something crazy about a pro day if you wanted to be, really esoteric. You could maybe say something about like an unbreakable record.
That's boring because the thing is, like Dusty, I was right, and you'd be like, "Oh, great," and then I wouldn't have to prove anything. I'd just be like, "No, I just heard a rumor that this wide receiver from Ass Nowhere Tech ran like a 4.1940." Like, whatever.
From State College Tech.
State College Tech. Western State College Tech. No, it's gonna be about free agency. It would be irresponsible to predict a specific free agent, so I could do that, but I'll instead say that the Vikings will make a quote unquote splash free agency signing. So obviously this does not include Adrian Peterson, right? Because it's not irresponsible. Because literally anything that could happen with Adrian Peterson is predictable, so it's not irresponsible. So we'll make a splash free agency signing. We can define that as somebody who makes, I think this is reasonable, $7.5 million average per year over the life of the contract or more. Is that like a reason, or should that be higher?
No, I would say that's a pretty decent threshold for making a splash in free agency. I mean, how many? Well, we'll get to this in the mailbag, I guess, a little bit, but there can't be that many guys left at positions in need for the Vikings that would be worth that kind of money.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly no one at guard. Uh, Maybe people at linebacker. I don't know. I'd have to look over the linebacker list, but yeah, unlikely.
Wildly irresponsible, perhaps.
Indeed.
So I want half credit for. So mine's a two-parter, and I want half credit if I get half of this right.
It's not usually how this works, but go on.
I know, but there are four possible combinations, and it would be hilarious if this were a thing. But my prognostication for this week is that Adrian Peterson and DeMarco Murray are picked up by Oakland and Jacksonville.
The Murray one to Jacksonville doesn't count.
Well, not respectively. Like DeMarco Murray is rumored to be kind of like deciding between Oakland and Jacksonville. He met with Jason Garrett tonight after the Mavericks game briefly. People on Twitter are describing it as like a 10-minute meeting that was quote unquote significant, but yeah, right. But it seems that the general conventional wisdom, which for whatever that's worth,
right,
at this point, is that DeMarco Murray is choosing between Oakland and Jacksonville, and it wouldn't surprise me if Adrian Peterson ended up in the other place.
Okay, so I don't think you get half credit for this one then, because I think what would be interesting is if those two running backs both sign for both. You know what I mean? Like or for either, rather, instead of in extra. So if DeMarco Murray signs with Jacksonville, I don't think you get any credit for that because Jacksonville's supposed to be the front runner now.
Okay.
So in order for this wildly responsible prognostication to give you any credit, you need to get full credit, which is that Murray signs for one of those two organizations and Adrian Peterson plays for the other one.
Well, I actually think that might work out. I mean, I think Murray would be a better fit for Jacksonville, and I think Oakland is more likely to, I guess, or Oakland has more stuff that the Vikings would potentially be interested trade wise.
Yeah. I wonder who the Vikings would, because I mean they wouldn't get they would have to get like Oakland's second round pick, right? At the most, because I mean that's a high second round pick. Like what else does Oakland have that the Vikings want? They don't want Charles Woodson.
No, Khalil Mack though, maybe Justin Tuck.
No. The Raiders are not going to give them Khalil Mack. Probably not going to give him Justin Tuck. They're definitely not giving Khalil Mack for Adrian. That would never happen.
No, that's a reach. But Justin Tuck potentially. I guess maybe James Jones.
How old is Tuck?
27, I think. Oh no, I was wrong. I was way wrong. Justin Tuck is 31.
Yeah, no. Yeah. F that. I mean, I'm sure they would be interested in that then. But
Justin Tuck in a fourth round pick? No.
From the Vikings end, nope. Anyway. Yeah, anything that the Vikings would want from Oakland is either too small a compensation for Adrian Peterson, or is someone that Oakland would not trade. I mean, it's
so it'd be pretty much second round pick, like you were saying. Then
that's a really high second round pick. I could see it as like a third round pick plus a fourth round pick, right? I mean, I think you could package those together, and then everyone would be really pissed because it's a third round pick. But I mean, a third and a fourth is pretty nice. It's that second round pick is so high. I can't see that.
And we were talking last week or 2 weeks ago rather, about the potential value in having extra third and fourth round picks in this draft. So
yeah,
it's not that outrageous. It is, however, wildly irresponsible.
Yeah, well, it's the ethos of the show.
So fine. I'm gonna I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it official. I'm gonna add the word respectively to my prognostication. So Adrian Peterson has to go to Oakland. DeMarco Murray has to end up in Jacksonville for me to get any credit.
Oh wow. Okay.
I'll go all the way out on that limb.
All right. You get no credit otherwise.
Works for
Good
me.
deal.
I never do anyway. Ha.
Oh,
No, that's not true. We have one mailbag question this week. Actually, that's not true. We have two.
geez, you're so bad at the mailbag.
They're decent questions. There's a lot of people involved in them, so we can go on at length if we desire,
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
as is our wont. Tim Clark, 65 underscore DN at Tim O Clark on Twitter writes us: best free agent left to pursue, Akeem Ayers, Chris Culliver / Parrish Cox.
I have Akeem Ayers as the highest available free agent left on my free agency wish list. Um, so he would theoretically be on the list. I like him a lot. I think I understand why other people wouldn't. Um, I would prefer Akeem Ayers over Chris Culliver or Parrish Cox. Parrish Cox would be a great fit because he can play both nickel and outside really, really well in a lot of different schemes. Doesn't sound like the Vikings are pursuing him. They are potentially pursuing Chris Culliver. We talked about that earlier in the show. Culliver would be interesting because he's pretty talented, but he has the following three problems. He said some really homophobic stuff on the Super Bowl media day. He said that he would never want a gay player to play on his team, and that they don't have any gay players in their team. He later apologized for that, and he's like, "That's not me. I'm not cool in my heart, etc." Yeah, so he said this thing. The second thing is, I think he's still currently being prosecuted for pulling brass knuckles out of his car and threatening a driver. It wasn't a driver; it was a 15-year-old boy, but I think it was a driver. So this is what happens. So he's like driving and he strikes a bicycle and a bicyclist, obviously, and he just like drives away. And so another car, sees him do this, and so they box him in so he can't run away. So they like follow him and then they box him in, and then he comes out of his car. He threatens this person. Then he goes back to his car and he pulls out some brass knuckles. So for that, he goes to jail. So I don't think that trial has been resolved yet. So that's the second problem. The third is he spent a lot of 2013 injured. So, but he is very talented.
Is that enough? No, it sounds like.
It's probably not enough for the Vikings. It's definitely not enough for me to say the best free agent left, because it sounds like he's the kind of guy who's going to get your team in trouble. But B, I don't know if you need to worry about the outside cornerback position as much. And Culliver, to me, I think, is just more of an outside guy. I'm worried more about the slot stuff, which is why Parrish Cox would be more interesting to me. It's why Kareem Jackson was second on my list, because he's a slot cornerback. But, yeah, not many more of those left. I think, well, I could take a look at my list right now and see who's left. Because there's actually a lot of people left in the list that are like worth thinking about. So there's Rolanda McClain, also off-field issues, a lot of concussions. He did retire once, might do it again, who knows. He is one violation of the NFL's drug policy away from being suspended for 4 games. He's already been fined 4 games. And before he unretired and went to Dallas, he was awful. So those are all the things you have to worry about. But he was not awful last year. So he's actually very good. And it's not like a quarterback, I think. I think a linebacker, you can't accidentally look like you have good film. Like you can't accidentally end up with a lot of tackles. Right? I mean, we've talked about that endlessly. But you can't accidentally like have good film. And so there was talent there. The Cowboys unlocked it. I would trust Mike Zimmer to unlock it again. I think the other one I would mention is Raheem Moore. I like Derek Morgan a lot, and I think he's a better player than either McClain or Moore. but he's an edge defender, and the Vikings do need to figure out what they're going to do at Robinson's spot. Just don't think it's as high as a priority as safety. So Raheem Moore is probably the guy I would put as the other top free agent guy to answer this person's question. So Ayers, McLean, Moore in some order.
Brett Kreis asks us via Facebook.
Oh.
Series of I guess 5 comments. Ndama Kung Su, wicked overpaid or overpaid wickedly?
New cap. I don't know. Overpaid wickedly. If I had to choose between the two, I don't think he's that overpaid, but overpaid wickedly.
The Frank Gore, a renege or the media jumping the gun, or both?
Renege. He. What's so funny about that?
You're just enthusiastic about it. It's like, renege.
I know the answer. I didn't know the answer to the last one. I know the answer to this one. Definitely renege, because he told people that he made a decision, and he told people that he switched a decision that he made, and he like cried about it the night before free agency opened, and he was swayed from the decision probably by LaShawn McCoy, which would be hilarious if that's true. No, he definitely made a decision, and he definitely pulled back on the decision, and that is totally within his rights, because that's what happens when you create a tampering period. So,
yeah, I mean, it is a renege, but I don't think it's that big of a deal that it is. I mean,
it's not morally a renege to me. It's very. That's what I'm using my time for. But it is a renege. He agreed to something he pulled out.
Yeah, no, I don't think a moral crime was committed, though. I would agree with that. Jeremy Macklin, did the Chiefs even football?
Better than the Eagles might. Who knows? Man, I'm really interested in the Eagles, because, man, if that turns out, everyone looks like an idiot, and that would be awesome. And that includes me. But did the Chiefs even football? Defensively, they football pretty well.
They football hard. Their run game is on point.
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to continue. They lost like 3 of their 5 offensive linemen. So
that's true. And Jamal Charles is not a young man.
Correct. And has as many ACL surgeries as Adrian Peterson. So, right? He's done. No, I don't know. No, I think people assume Charles is younger than he is because he's a scat back. I don't know. People just like assume those people are younger. But yeah, I mean, the run game may not be on point. I mean, they lost 3. They actually lost 4 out of 3 offensive linemen. But because they lost Jeff Schwartz and they lost like the 3 starters. So, whoops. Yeah, I mean, things are pretty iffy over an offensive line land, but they've got a great defense, so they can defensively football. Offensively, I'm not sure they can football.
Andre Johnson and DeMarco Murray, who will overpay for them?
Well, we know that actually it's very likely going to be the Colts, and also the Colts may even have a friendly deal for Andre Johnson. I don't know. That would be kind of surprising. But Andre wants to reunite with Frank Gore. They played at the University of Miami together. So maybe he took a discount. But he might still be overpaid. I doubt it. Sounds like it's pretty cheap. In fact, the deal might already be announced. I could probably look it up if I wasn't lazy. DeMarco Murray, it feels like the Oakland Raiders want to overpay him more because now they have more cap space than the Jaguars, because the Jaguars started signing real people to real contracts. But I'm going to say the Jaguars because Gus Bradley recruited DeMarco Murray, and he's a hell of a recruiter.
Yeah. I'm going to stick with what we were saying before. Jacksonville.
Yeah.
For DeMarco Murray is going to pay whatever he asks for, because they've got a good chunk of cap space. Like they're more concerned about getting over the floor than they are hitting the cap, aren't they?
I wouldn't worry about the floor.
Is that just the Raiders?
I wouldn't worry about the floor too much. Like, if you don't hit the floor, there's no penalty, so whatever.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, you just have to pay the difference to the players that have played on your team. So, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Also, the floor
Adam,
is actually not a cap floor; it is a cash floor. So the amount of cash your team spends in those 4 years has to be 89% of the cap. So the entire signing bonus counts this year. The prorated, it doesn't matter. So if you sign someone and you give them a $10 million signing bonus, all 10 million of that, regardless of the length of the contract, regardless of the cap hit, because it's only a $2 million cap hit, but the cash, all $10 million of that applies towards the salary floor. So it's a cash flow cap indexed
which
to
is
the cap.
like which is like 89% of 120 some million. So 10 million would go a long way towards
Right.
getting you to that cash floor. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Adam Schefter, how much caffeine will he slash has he ingested today?
He freebases it
Do you think he's one of those guys that buys like multiple six packs of 5 Hour Energy?
easily.
Oof, that stuff is dangerous.
I know.
It's like it man that
It can ruin you, yeah.
the Indian doctor who invented it is a freaking genius. It's just
It
like
really is
you,
just like some random, like, because they just put a bunch of B vitamins in water.
yeah, and like guarana or something for the caffeine. Like
Yeah.
it's I don't know what their combination is, but yeah, it was just some Indian doctor, and his claim to fame was really just like incredible marketing, I guess, and not so much the ingredients. But I mean, I drink a lot of coffee, and the first time I drank a 5 Hour Energy, I was like, I feel great. I should have another one, and
Oh
I
god.
immediately knew that they were trouble.
Oh god. Well, that's because B vitamins are mood enhancers in a way that caffeine is not. Because I mean, I don't know the chemistry behind this, so maybe I'm way wrong. But B vitamins enable but do not provide cell metabolism, and that happens to increase your mood. So they don't provide energy; they just kind of unlock available energy. I guess I again not a biochemist, but that is, and so coffee doesn't have like B vitamins.
Right.
Fruit does, and that's why like you eat fruit to feel. I mean, that's like a thing. Like you gain a little bit of energy. That's why you like eat an apple. Although I don't know if they have B vitamins, but eating an apple is supposed to be more effective at waking you up than a cup of coffee, which BS, but that's supposed to be science.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't buy into that. That is bunk science. I don't
but
believe that.
but yeah, and so it has a reasonable amount of caffeine. They say as much as a cup of coffee if your coffee sucks, I guess. But it's like a reasonable amount of caffeine, and then some stuff that's like gussied up to make people think it's caffeine, but it's not like taurine and guaranine. But no one knows what their chemical effect in the human body is. But it's not regulated, so they just put it in there.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have to say, so whatever.
And then a bunch of B vitamins because that makes you feel really good. In fact, they put so many B vitamins in there that they warn you. Well, so the good thing about B vitamins is that they're water soluble, so anything that you don't use, you just pee out. But they warn you, hey, so when you drink this, your face might get really flushed 5 minutes after you drink this. Don't worry about that. That's just called the niacin flush.
Oh yeah, because there's like 10 times a daily dose of
Yeah,
niacin in one bottle of 5 Hour
yeah,
Energy. Like so,
exactly.
your capillaries may like blow up like overcooked hot dogs, but
So don't worry, that's
just
just
ignore
part of
that.
the process.
Just give it 20 minutes. Just power through it.
Yeah, but I mean, they make you feel great.
They really do.
And the flavors are becoming bearable, which might be the worst thing.
Oh, dude, that pomegranate flavor one is actually like kind of good.
The new strawberry watermelon one is like not insanely tart, and is pretty decent. The sour apple one, obviously, it's a little tart. Also, pretty good. So that's dangerous. That's even worse than like the berry or lemon lime bullshit they were selling before.
Oh god, the lemon lime. Although my brother likes to get the lemon lime ones and then dump them into a bottle of Mountain Dew.
To like hide the.
It makes it taste like Mountain Dew apparently, except then you've got a 5 Hour Energy's worth of energy, 5 hours worth of energy afterward. But he's a crazy person. I don't recommend that.
Yeah, I don't either. How much caffeine does Mountain Dew have? Jesus.
Less than 5 Hour Energy, but more if you pour one into it.
No kidding. All right.
tell you that.
What's I'm sure that was relevant to the last question. What's our next question?
That was it. That was all. That was all 2 questions.
Oh,
This has been the Norse code mailbag.
well, I'm glad we went on a tangent about 5-hour energy using like my obviously lockdown knowledge of biochemistry.
Well, let's get Adam Schefter on. Let's ask him how many 5-hour energies he drinks over the first few days of free agency. If it's just little bottles like littering the floor of his car.
Breaking! I'm bleeding out of my ears. That's Adam Schefter.
Breaking. There's something wrong with my keyboard. Keeps typing all these double letters. Also, I hear this weird rushing sound in my ears.
Breaking! There are little witches dancing outside my window.
Breaking. There's a gremlin on the wing of this plane. I swear.
Patriots have traded a 5th-round pick for it.
For the gremlin? God, I hope he gets the league minimum.
Well, an elite punt returner, man.
But the gremlin's legs are so short. He's got like
Very
even Teddy
hard to
Bridgewater
tackle.
has skinny knees.
Very hard to tackle.
That's fair. I just wonder if he can get the distance that an NFL kicker is expected to. I mean, he is just an airplane gremlin.
Well,
But
I mean,
he's
you can't make a trade without taking a little risk, okay?
and he's a hard worker. He's the first one at practice and the last one to leave.
It's true.
He's
It's a gym rat gremlin. Gym gremlin.
he's a gym gremlin. He's a high motor gremlin.
I'm a gremlin. And I mean, he's pretty sneakily fast for those short legs, I think. Yeah, we just turned the gremlin into a wide receiver.
Yeah, right. Because that's what you really need in a kicker is for him to be sneakily fast. That's great. Parting shots for this week. Anything you want to plug? I know we hit the live blog and the free agency tracker on Vikings territory and Daily Norseman, respectively. I imagine you will be writing pieces as you continue to break news about free agency.
Yeah, nothing to plug. I'm just ready. I don't even know what my next thing I'm going to type is. I'm so drained. I know that I will sleep at some point tonight. I just do not have that mapped out. So I have no idea what to plug for like tomorrow. That's like years away for me.
You'll have a sleep and then worry about all of next week later.
Yeah, basically.
That's...
Oh, holy crap! Well, actually, by the time this airs, it won't matter. But by the time this airs, you may have heard me on 1500 ESPN because I will be there tomorrow per this recording. Probably yesterday by the time you hear this. Maybe 2 days later. I'm not very good about posting these. On 1500
ESPN.
Wednesday
is what you're saying.
I will be on the local Minnesota radio station.
Wednesday, March 11th. Catch Arif Hassan on 1500 ESPN. So your media tour continues even after Norse Code.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of like talking and stuff.
Oh, what was the what was the other podcast you were a guest on this week? Let's throw them a shout out.
Oh, they had to cancel.
Oh, womp womp.
Yeah,
well,
but I had an extended radio appearance with ESPN 710 in Utah, so that's cool.
Hey.
Yeah. We talked about the pride of Utah, Matt Asiata.
Really? He's from Utah?
Yeah, he went to school there. He's a Mormon, I think. He was pretty good for the Utah Utes. I feel like I just made that up. No, he was good for the Utah Utes.
This would be a good thing to say right now. No, that's my job, not your job. Your job is to correct me when I do things like that.
And I was able to like pump up Asiata. I was like, no, I mean Vikings fans hate him, but he's underrated, I swear.
3 yards and a first down, 3 touchdowns or none. That's Matt Asiata for you.
3 touchdowns or none. I love that. I love that he did that 3 times. It was so disappointing the one game he had
the
one
first
touchdown.
3 times too. It was the perfect trend, and then he had to go and ruin it by only scoring 1 touchdown. Jerk.
Because the trend started last year, so we didn't actually notice it right away. So he scored 3 touchdowns at like the end of last year, and like
the end of 2 seasons ago. If
Oh,
we're
yeah.
because
Yeah.
free
Right.
agency is like the start of the new league
Yeah.
year. So
So
yeah, 2 seasons ago
yeah.
he started, and then he did it early last
And we were
season,
like, oh,
and then
that's kind of cool. And I was like, oh, actually, I had to compile a bunch of Vikings records. So that's actually, he's tied for the most rushing touchdowns in a game already with 3. So it's kind of cool. He got another 3. And then it happened again. We were just like, oh, well, I guess this is the thing now.
and what a glorious thing it was.
He was like 9th in the league in rushing touchdowns.
But I mean, we know why that is. It's not because he breaks runs and goes like 60
He's the
yards.
most absurd stat. Well, it's because he stole a bunch of Teddy Bridgewater and Jerick McKinnon's touchdowns. But yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Norse Code. You can find us on our website, norsecodepodcast.com, and also on dailynorseman.com. You can find Arif on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can find me at Dusty O'Connell. Our intrepid producer, James, is at Big Mono, and he also monitors the official Norse Code Twitter account at NorseCodeDN. Check us out on Facebook. Facebook.com/Daily Norseman, all one word. If you happen to be on our website, consider this a plug to click the little yellow donate button at the bottom of the page and contribute $5 one time to ensure that Norse Code remains on the air for you in perpetuity. I can't believe we're coming up on our 3rd season reporting on the Vikings. That is...
Oh, that's crazy.
I know for 2 people who are generally pretty aggressive about like not finishing projects and like not executing cleanly on things, like it's a miracle that anybody has left us in charge of this for this long and we haven't quit.
We're notoriously both bad at this among our friend groups. Oh my God.
Like I imagine if you took like both of our sets of friends and made a list of like everyone you would want in charge of a project like this, both of our names would be at the bottom of like every list.
Absolutely. With James near us.
Yeah, it's a good thing he's there. He's occasionally stuck the pitchfork into our butts to keep us moving. It's a good thing he's there, and he performs a lot of valuable services for us, not just getting roped into fake Vince Wilfork trade tweets. But yeah, so we will probably, unless everything goes crazy again in the next few days with the free agency stuff, if we happen to get some actual forward movement on the Adrian Peterson thing, if he signs or doesn't sign, then you can anticipate an episode where we dissect that in laborious detail next week. Otherwise, we will probably reappear the week after with another aggressively long-winded episode of Norse Code. Aggressively long-winded, because we don't care. Your time, whatever you're doing, is worth very little. It's worth about $5 once.
So, 5 of your dollars, actually.
Norse Code, it's worth 5 of your dollars. Oh, that's great. Until then, though, our formula is and will remain that Christian Ponder sucks. We'll see you then.
Norse Code is the official podcast of the Daily Norseman SB Nation blog and is produced with cooperation from Pompous Jerk Productions. Pompous Jerk Productions. Attitude with attitude. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of their contributors and do not reflect official positions of the Minnesota Vikings, SB Nation, the Daily Norseman staff, or PJP. No information in this podcast should be construed as gambling advice. Please obey all local gaming laws.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.